Okay, next we have farming. And farming is basically the redirecting of a website's traffic to somewhere else. So a host thinks they're going to website A, but they're actually going to website B. Okay, so instead of going to a legitimate website, they're going to a fraudulent website. And that can be accomplished by modifying either the host file on the host or the router itself. All right, so the victim believes they're going to a legit site, and once they're there, if that person actually configures this fraudulent website to look like the legitimate website, it might have login credentials, well, then the victim may put in their username and password or credit card information or what have you, and that's going to be captured by the criminal. All right, so credentials, person identifiable information, or PII, so on and so forth. All right, so as an example, here we have a farming diagram, and we have a target PC, which is going to be the victim, and we have a DNS server. They're going to traverse through the DNS, right? They're going to query the DNS server. The DNS server will respond back and say, oh, here's the IP address of the website you're trying to get to, in this case, myfinancialsite.com. It's going to respond back with the IP address. The target PC then initiates a connection to that IP address and connects to that website, right? That's how it typically works. Well, if the hacker is able to modify, right, attack that DNS server and change the settings on that DNS server, well, then they're able to point it to Hack Me Now instead of the financial site they thought they're going to. All right, so that's a bad thing. Another way they can do that is if they go into the target PC, right? If they have access to that PC itself and they modify the host file. Because if you recall, when we do address resolution, we're going to check the host file locally on our machine first. If that doesn't have the address we're looking for, or if we don't have a host file, then I'll go out and query DNS. All right, so that's kind of how that resolution process works. So in this case, if we're able to modify that host file, you'll see basically instead of having 216.15.55.201, instead of going to my financial site, which you'll see is actually 23.44.150.31, that's the legitimate IP address of that site, we're going to modify it on the target PC and say, nope, the IP address is going to be 216.15.55.201, and we're going to link that to the URL, okay, www.myfinancialsite.com. So when the user at the target PC types in that web address, instead of going to the legitimate website, they're actually going to be redirected to www.hackmenow.com. Right? Only they think they're going to the financial site. So if they're presented with a similar looking site with credentials, they're being asked for credentials, chances are good they're going to go ahead and put those credentials in, and then it's off to the races. Okay, the criminals have that information. They can go in and now go back to the real site and enter in username, password, and have access to that financial site as the user that was just hacked. Okay, now this is also known as DNS poisoning or ARP poisoning, depending on how it's perpetrated, whether it's local to a network or if it's going out over the internet. Okay, you can do the same thing basically with an ARP cache as you can with a DNS cache or a host file. It just depends on the type of attack, but just so the kind of takeaway is that this specific technique can be known as farming, but then also DNS poisoning or ARP poisoning.